We've seen Mark yesterday with his teaser brief, telling us just a little bit about the work that Uber has been doing, the vision that Mark has communicated, and the one that Uber has been so adamantly pushing forward and creating the energy that's really accelerated this market and created a lot of the work specifically for the variety of different partners that are out there, creating to some degree this NASA approach, well aligned actually with NASA. So Mark, thanks for being back with us. Looking forward to hearing some more of the details of this vision, and in particular, the role that we might be able to play to make this vision a reality very quickly. Mark, over to you.
Thank you, Nathan. And this has been really fantastic first few days. So congrats to your entire team there. So if you've seen any of my prior talks before, you'll know that I'm going to try to convince you that the technologies are real and game-changing in terms of the capabilities they enable, and that as a system solution, all the different pieces are starting to come together. But most importantly, is that there is a real business case for a vibrant market here. And that is really at the heart of Uber's contribution as the end user, essentially helping to get to the right place in terms of integrated requirements and capabilities. Next slide. So even though the technologies are really cool, that's not why we're doing it. We're doing this because society has a fundamental need, and that is, more specifically, big cities are facing gridlock, and they need more choices in transportation to be able to keep them as productivity engines. Next slide. So I understand that there is reason for skepticism, right? I mean, we've had different transportation revolutions through the ages, but we've had the same solutions for quite a while now, right? The railroad was 150 years ago, the automobile 100 years ago, commercial aviation about 50 years. So we've had the same solutions for essentially an entire generation. So talking about something that's completely new and different, I understand the skepticism, but there's real opportunity for change here. And again, it's not just to change things, but because we need to have the new capability to move forward and maximize productivity. So in this next slide, you see just as how cities have grown up literally to take advantage of 3 dimensions, we need to do the same with transportation and be able to take to the air and overcome that gridlock and leapfrog into the future with new solutions that, as much as possible, give us a new clean slate to design things almost from scratch. And that's really much a rarity in today's modern complex society. Going to the next slide. In a nutshell, this is what we're enabling. And this is Los Angeles, a trip from LAX to Staples Center in rush hour, which in Los Angeles, lasts most of the day. So to be able to go that 16.5 mile distance, it takes about an hour and 20 minutes. What we want to enable is that you can do that same trip, but be able to fly go as the crow flies, and turn that into a 10-mile trip that only takes about 27 minutes. And to put this in context, the flying portion of that is only about 5 minutes. So we're really trying to give truth in advertising here that you've got to account for all the multimodal delays, because this very much is multimodal transportation, where we're integrating together for a true seamless door-to-door transportation solution or trip. The ground leg, the air leg, and the ground leg, and accounting for any waits and delays as people need to board and gain access to these different modes of transportation. So you see that as we go from an hour and 20 minutes down to 27 minutes, most of that time is spent in the intermodal delays. And the air lag, what you really want to do is provide, those access ports as close to where people are, so that you can minimize the ground time and delays and maximize the air time. Going to the next slide. So we at Uber, published this white paper, which kind of was the genesis of all this 3.5 years ago. And we specifically identified there were 10 barriers that really were stopping this from happening, and how we perceived that these barriers could be overcome relatively quickly as a collaborative ecosystem investment approach. And so we made this invitation for all to work together with us to enable this future vision of a new transportation choice for cities. Going to the next slide. Here's really the two fundamental ingredients that I need to talk about. On the left side, you can see the Uber app. On the right side, you can see one of our ECRMs, or common reference models, that we've shared with the world of what these new vehicles are going to look like. It really is the combination of these two things. You can't just say, hey, we will build a new vehicle and the market will come. It is about this integration across the different pillars coming together to enable a business case that has a vibrant market. And so it is as much about the first and last mile as it is that exciting air journey over this city. And as Uber, we very much over the last decade solved that first and last mile solution. So I want to get into both aspects of this. So from an Uber perspective, 10 years ago, there really wasn't on-demand transportation. The closest thing we had was a taxi, which had many, many delays and encumbrances, which isn't what you can experience today, where if you're in San Francisco or other major cities, you can pull out an app and in 3 minutes have a car there. And it's because of the scale of operations that we've been able to achieve very, very quickly. So starting with Uber Black, it was a very limited product for an exclusive few. But within just a few years, we were able to leverage that into UberX and then Uber Pool, where now we're doing over 15 million trips a day. And being able to have that, all those trips, is what gives this liquidity of access, which is critical for aerial ride sharing to work. And at Uber, we really have this perspective that we're a platform provider. So it's not just about being able to provide one type of vehicle, but to provide whatever transportation option makes the most sense for our users. So whether that's a bicycle or a scooter, or a pool trip or individual trip, or even access to public transportation, we're actively working with cities to be able to get those into the app and enable people to choose whatever best fits their specific trip needs. Moving on to the next slide. So as we started this, obviously I've been doing powered lifts for 35 years now. That's all I've done at NASA. It's what I've loved. Even when I was a little kid, growing up, I knew that's what I wanted to work on. But helicopters, as much as I love them, are absolutely not right for what we need to enable this market. They're not good enough from a performance perspective, either in terms of the speed or efficiency to achieve a sustainable transportation solution. and certainly not good enough in terms of the community noise that is a real expectation that we need to meet, as well as safety. Going on to the next slide. So this is one of the electric vertical takeoff and landing concepts that we've been very much pushing to enable with our partners. And you can see, yeah, like any aircraft, the requirements are very much need to be focused on achieving speed, payload, and range, right? Because that's productivity. And aerospace, anytime you get into the air, it's much more expensive than being on the ground, because the consequence of failure is much more serious. So from a speed perspective, we've done lots and lots of simulations. In fact, we have an incredible simulation team led by Ian Villa here at Uber, where we have studied with the Flux tool and understand the importance of productivity. And that's why all the partners that you see us working with on the vehicles are doing winged eVTOL, because we need that speed and efficiency that yields a range on the order of 10 miles to 60 miles, but more importantly, lets us fly continuously for about 3 hours with only 5 to 7 minute stops for loading and unloading passengers and topping up that charge, so that we can fly in those times in the morning and afternoon when you have to keep your fleet flying. From a payload perspective, we need to be able to pool together 3 to 4 passengers in order to amortize the other costs, in particular the pilot. So it really is critical. The business case does not make sense unless you do this pooled ride-sharing experience, which we've gotten really, really good at in Uber on the ground. Going to the next slide, it's not just about speed, range, and payload. We have to give the cities a sustainable green solution. And so we are committed, and have been from the very first days, of an all-electric battery-driven solution that has no in-flight emissions. Likewise, with the next slide, we've got to be quiet, way, way quieter than helicopters. In fact, our estimates are on the order of 15 decibels quieter. So we need to, and the reason for that is we need to be able to blend into the background noise levels of cities, which tends to be on the order of 60 to 70 dB, measured from a 300 to 500 foot distance. Helicopters are much more in the 85 dB at that same distance. We've got to be much, much quieter than that. And fortunately, that is where these distributed electric propulsion technologies shine, to get rid of that edgewise flight in cruise, because you don't have advancing retreating blades that need to spin at really high tip speeds. So we get away from those high tip speeds and get to much, much quieter aircraft. En route is just as important in terms of being quiet. We need to be at that 50 to 60, more 50-ish overflight at 1,000 feet. And that's why you heard me many times saying the best. This market is all about winged eVTOL. You can't be in powered lift mode flight with these multicopters at cruise, because you simply make too much noise with powered flight. As soon as you can get onto that wingboard flight, it really lets you get so much quieter at cruise. Advancing to the last slide, safety is critical. And again, distributed electric propulsion fundamentally changes the rules on how we can design aircraft to embrace getting rid of single part failure components, so that you can fail one, even two components and still have propulsion and lift and thrust sufficient to maintain your flight and to complete the trip. That is a fundamental difference that helicopters have not achieved and never will achieve, and that's why these aircraft are so important to enabling the vision. Going to the next slide, this kind of shows the different pillars that we have at Uber. where on the right side you see what we're building at Uber, which is very much the software side of things. We are very, very good at software. We have thousands of the best computer scientists and programmers on the planet. So that really is composed of two different parts. It's the multimodal ride sharing and the Elevate Cloud Services, the airspace management portion. And you really can't separate those if you're going to have efficient networks. You need to be able to combine both together to sequence your operations seamlessly in order to have these efficient trips that are saving time, and that is our value proposition, is in time savings. So the left side is what we have invited our partners to do. And that is in terms of the electric aircraft. We're not trying to do it all. We know that there are aircraft companies out there that are much better at doing it, and we have partnered with them. Likewise with the infrastructure, there's real estate experts and architectural firms who can do that job better than us. And they have been very responsive in coming together with us to achieve this collaboration. Going on to the next slide. Here's our current 8 vehicle partners that we've announced publicly. Yes, there are more coming. And it's not just about us picking one as a winner. We want to enable all these vehicle companies to be successful. And just as proof for how enabling distributed electric propulsion is, and how much we are in a Wright Brothers era, look at those 8 different aircraft. Every single one of them is completely different. Every approach is unique. And that's, again, because there's such an opening of the design space that these technologies enable that no one honestly knows the best way to do it. And there is a diversity of missions, so that probably there isn't just one best way of doing it. Some are going to favor speed more, some will favor comfort. So we will have the equivalent of Camry, Priuses, and Cadillacs in the air, and may they all be successful. We want to put them on our platform for our users. Going on to the next slide, you've heard me say for years how much I wanted to get the automotive companies into urban air mobility. And it was so exciting in January when Hyundai announced and showed their vision vehicle at CES. Not only that, but they pledged a massive investment over the next 5 years of $1.5 billion to enable their vehicle and their system solution as they work with us as partners. Next slide. Joby is also a very important partner to us. This is not just a pretty rendering. This is an actual eVTOL aircraft that is flying today. And to show you just how much I think of this aircraft, I actually asked Joby if I could have a picture of their early flight testing to show side by side to the Wright brothers. That's how excited I am about what they've accomplished and how thrilling it is to work with the future legends of aviation who are pioneering this. But Joe Van Beaver, being the modest person that he is, denied that request and told me to just show what they've already released publicly. It's also incredibly exciting that they've partnered with Toyota, who really has an incredible long-term view of mobility, not just as a car company, but as an enabler of mobility solutions for the future, and really has, over the last 50 years, pioneered the mass manufacturing of automobiles with just-in-time manufacturing and so many other innovations. Now, I told Jay this is the sexiest slide that I have, not because of him, but of what he said. at this event several months ago. And it's essentially said that there are 6 companies that are already well along their way in certification, and that, more importantly, there are no rule changes required in order for these aircraft to be certified. That's really important. So from day one, as we introduced our vision, most of the negativity, the criticism was, you'll never be able to get these vehicles certified. And just as others have complimented the FAA, I have to say, the FAA has been incredible partners to work with. They have been proactively enabling this future while ensuring that safety is improved from current day operations. Also, as you heard Jay say again today, it's really critical that we bring the community along with us on this ride, and that we all enter into the next phase of community engagement so that we can overcome any beliefs that may already be there from helicopters and enable society to see what can be and what will be a very quiet and safe future transportation solution that they'll be able to use and will have equitable access across society. Going on to the next slide, I really want to change gears from the vehicle into the infrastructure. You saw here our first vision of taking an elevated parking garage and turning the top deck into a skyport. Let's go on to the next slide, where we've compiled some of the different solutions that our architectural partners and real estate partners have come up with, where they're really looking at this as much more of a holistic transportation hub, where the top deck can be a skyport, but the other levels can be a transportation hub, where with one utility drop for an electric grid for 5 to 10 megawatts, you can have eVTOL charging during the day and autonomous electric cars and scooters and bikes charging at night to have a load leveling, which the utilities really need. Going on to the next slide, this really is a transportation solution that needs to be data-driven. We have lots of data at Uber to help optimize our users' experience. So placement of these skyports is really critical, again, to maximize the air legs, minimize the ground legs, get the skyports where they can be most productive, but also where they can be situated where the background noise level of cities is complementary, so we fit in as good neighbors in each area where these skyports are located. Going on to the next slide. Also, airspace access is a critical element of this, as others have highlighted. We've been really fortunate to have Tom Prevost from NASA join our team several years ago, and he's really instituted a fantastic collaboration with NASA, and kudos to PK and all of his team. As Davis highlighted earlier, we've had fantastic simulation partnering with NASA, and that's going to transition into validation flight testing. So really could not be more proud of Tom and PK and what they've already accomplished and will accomplish with airspace. Going on to the next slide, Tom has also been able to leverage our drone investment into early testing of the airspace through the FAA IPP program and our partnership with the city of San Diego, where those drone tests have been going on. So again, kudos to that team who has done an outstanding job of being able to incubate the technology and get them into operational testing. And that's why we're also already in New York with Ubercopter and being able to test multi-mobility, test the seamless integration in our app of selecting a trip. If you're in Manhattan, you can essentially go in and open up the Uber app and choose for an UberX to pick you up, get you to one of the Manhattan heliports, fly you to JFK as a seamless integrated trip. So going on to the next slide, kudos to our copter team, which has done an outstanding job of pioneering multimodal trips. You can see here in this video of being able to select the apps. Also, they've established great partnerships with existing helicopter operators. We're currently flying the Bell 430, a twin-engine, incredibly safe aircraft. And again, we couldn't be more proud of what we've been doing with those operations to prove safe flight and multimodal. Going on to the next slide, all of this has to be wrapped into a business case economics that makes sense. So I'm really going to finish it up here. Helicopter economics just don't work. If you look at to the left, essentially they're about $9 per passenger mile. What we're enabling with these eVTOL aircraft is on the order of a 35% reduction, most of it due to reduced energy costs and maintenance costs because of the nature of the eVTOL. And that's from day one, even with an inefficient network. But as over the next few years, as we can optimize, get our load factor up, more pooling efficiency, using the eVTOL from instead of a few hundred hours, but up to 1,000 hours and eventually to 2,000 hours per year, that utilization and load factor are the key driving force to get these costs down to that UberX-like level. And to be, again, truth in advertising, UberX, you have the vehicle, you have the car to yourself. With Uber Air, you're going to be sharing the ride with others and pooling so that the costs are reduced through that sharing the trip. In the long term, as we bring in, again, autonomous flight, we're not dependent on it because we can do this with pilots in the beginning, but as we can bring in autonomous higher volume manufacturing, the next generation of lithium metal batteries, and certified thermoplastics, that really enables us to get to the next level of costs where this can compete, in our perspective, even with private car ownership. Going to the next slide, you can see here what we're anticipating. We're starting with just a few markets. By the end of 2023, we expect to be in the first market in one of our early adopter cities, and then have a crawl, walk, run strategy as we work towards many more markets. Going to the next slide, we have announced 3 partner cities where we're looking at early operations. This won't happen all at once. We're going to be constrained with the number of vehicles that we have and the need for our partners to be able to spool up operations in each of those cities. So it will take years to get across all these early adopter cities, but we're still committed to getting to the first city as soon as possible. Next slide, you can see, we've analyzed many cities globally, and there's just such a vibrant opportunity across so many large cities to help overcome their gridlock. I think I need to wrap it up. We're just about out of time. Going to my last slide. Again, this is not just about cool technology. This is about a vibrant market that has a valid business case. I lived through the very light jet days with DayJet. I have a lot of learning experiences there that was a painful experience for a different part of aerospace. And I am absolutely committed that every dollar that we invest in this is practical, has a solution path where the critical path is not blocked. And with that, Nate, I'll turn it back to you. Thank you very much for your time.
Super. Mark, just a couple of quick follow-on questions, if you don't mind. The first one, as you know, obviously, the reason we're all here is because of the COVID crisis. What effect do you think this has? Is this a little blip on the radar, or is this a pretty big diversion from the timelines that have been advertised previously?
Yeah, so in terms of the timeline, again, there's a dependency on our part across all the different partners. We're actually in a very fortunate place where, again, from the last several months of announcements, there's significant investment that's taken place, and so several partners are very well funded. We see essentially no change in our momentum and our partners' momentum, and that we're all committed to enabling this safe, quiet transportation revolution in aerial ride sharing. Certainly, COVID was a surprise, and all of the companies will have to adapt to different experiences. Our team has been incredibly productive as we've learned to do a lot more through Zoom and work through with our partners in Zoom, and we found them also to be able to also remain incredibly productive in these challenging days.
Super. Thanks. Yeah, I super appreciate the feedback on that, and I'm looking forward to hopefully getting beyond this quickly, and it is also a blip on the radar. In closing, can you provide us, if you had your top 10 list or something very short thereof, what are the key items that you think the Agility Prime effort can do to help catalyze and to help move this market forward? And then maybe on the other side, what do you see as our biggest risk? What are the things that you don't want us to do? And I'll let you close with those two. You can pick whichever and how many on each side. But I think we'd really value that feedback and communicating that out to all our partners too, so that we can help and not hurt this effort.
Yeah, great question. So I love the way that you're doing this, right? We need, you're not throwing new requirements that are just military focused. You are trying to leverage and accelerate the flywheel, which is what we're all about too. So I'll give 3 different answers in terms of really significant contributions, and it's very much mirroring what Davis and Bob said earlier from NASA. Certainly enabling the airspace. And again, as I said, there's such great work that's already happening there. It's easy to get started, but, and be able to fly just as helicopters fly today in cities. But to get to scale, there's a lot that needs to happen, right? We need to get to voiceless interactions with the towers to have hundreds of vehicles and then thousands of vehicles. So airspace is just a critical place where different parts of government can come together to coalesce the solutions in partnership with industry. Likewise, that was mentioned earlier with security of the different comm solutions, especially as we get into the next phase after the initial piloted phase and into the autonomous phase. And so let me bring up a third one there, and that is that transition from piloted to autonomous. There's some evolution that's going to take place there. And as we've worked with Gamma, we have a working group that's essentially calling that simplified vehicle operations. I think it's absolutely so critical that DoD, NASA, and flight standards at FAA get together to help form a common view of how this evolution can and will take place. Because there's still uncertainty there, right? I mean, we need to enable those simplified operations so that pilots can build up hours in this market and use those credits for other aviation markets, commercial aviation. But it's not a slam dunk there, where we have unified control law pilot interfaces being developed. The F-35 in the military did such a fantastic job. There's so many lessons learned from the F-35 that are being leveraged But the more we can have a common approach that we all agree to, the easier it is for flight standards to move forward, right? I mean, we don't want to train pilots in 10 different types of pilot interfaces and have pilots confused as they move from one vehicle to the other. We want it to be like a car, where if you get in a Toyota or a Camry or a Prius or a Lincoln Town Car, it's very obvious how that control interface is done in a seamless manner as you switch vehicles. So the last thing is, again, from the vehicle perspective, you mentioned a risk. I think we're well along the path. There's certainly lots of things to work out in special conditions. I think in the coming months, there's going to be a lot more information there. My worry in terms of risk is moving along the operational certification. I think there's so much work that has to be started there, and I would just encourage that across NASA, FAA, and DOT, and obviously industry, we really get that in gear.
Mark, thanks so much. Fantastic words, as always. Very motivational to see the energy behind this and the work that's happening every day that you are driving for. So thanks for